So there's been, I think, mounting pressures and certainly mounting consensus across the population and across the more progressive-minded local governments in Japan in understanding that recognition of same-sex partnerships is a part of equality. It's a part of an important part of an equal enjoyment of citizenship and benefits. And particularly for local wards in the Tokyo area, they have a very diverse population. And recognizing this key step through the same-sex registrations was one way that local governments were trying to send signals to the population that they serve that same-sex marriage and recognition for that matters to them, that they are supportive. As we all wait for the national government to take action in terms of making actual law reform changes to the Japanese family registry, which is currently, of course, a matter of national jurisdiction. So there's kind of, I guess, a struggle in terms of local jurisdictions not having control over family law or family registry, wanting to send signals because the national government has been really dragging its feet on it.
Well, it is a significant move, though. A lot more of the population will be covered once Tokyo is on board.
Certainly. I mean, Tokyo, with the intensification and densification of population in Japan, we do see upwards of 14 million in the greater Tokyo area. So having Governor Koike make a statement in favor of having a Tokyo-wide same-sex partnership approach, I think is really interesting. Right now, it's been ward by ward, so Shibuya ward, Setagaya ward, and each local, they're large cities in and of themselves, but those jurisdictions have to each do their own system. And I think standardizing that to say now Tokyo-wide has a common framework is important. I think it is important to mention that, of course, local governments don't have jurisdiction over these family registry matters. And so it is ultimately a national government legal issue and legal jurisdiction. But I think the pressure of putting a Tokyo-wide system into place can make it easier for same-sex couples in terms of if you're navigating through Tokyo, for example, in my instance, I was living in Sendai during the triple disaster of 2011. Well, if your partnership isn't recognized in your city, you can't actually go to a medical institution, you can't go to a hospital, you cannot go to any local authority to ask for information on the whereabouts and the safety and the medical status of your partner because you're not recognized as family. So this means you can't even get basic information. So if there is a Tokyo-wide framework, then I think that's important because it sends signals to the hospitals Tokyo-wide and to those jurisdictions that now the definition of family and the registration of those same-sex relationships can be hopefully implemented and honored and respected throughout all of those jurisdictions and all of those hospitals throughout Tokyo.
Although, Dr. Steele, it will be recognising same-sex partnerships but not marriage, what are the legal differences here and rights affected?
Well, and of course, again, the difficulty being that jurisdiction-wise, the local municipal governments don't have jurisdiction over marriage, over family law. And so they can issue recognition of the same-sex partnerships and the registration of those partnerships so that they can accord a certain status. But it's not equivalent to marriage. It certainly is not necessarily a step in terms of actually having legal standing of a marriage certificate for same-sex couples. So we still have work to do. And I think we've seen mounting pressures, both politically, legally through the court system, through social movement activism, through corporate activism. Corporations are also getting involved and supporting LAN, which is an organization that I have been involved with in support, certainly in terms of, trying to make sure that there is a same-sex marriage equality in this country.
Yet it is a step forward for the only nation in the group of 7 countries that doesn't recognise same-sex unions. What impact might it have on the country as a whole where equality is concerned?
I think certainly it raises questions. Why, if Japan is such a country that does believe in rule of law, that does absolutely stand up for democracy and human rights, and is wanting to be standing with other G7 countries in those values and those democratic commitments. I think it raised questions about why on this issue has there not been movement, as we raise questions also in terms of why there haven't been similar, movements in terms of the right to marrying couples who are heterosexual couples to even just have the same different last names. That is something that we have not been able to get movement on either, which is just a basic principle of individual rights and gender equality. So I think one of the interesting developments of this particular most recent, well, back in March, I guess it would be now, the Sapporo District Court, so at that time, presiding judge Tomoko Takebe made a decision for the court suggesting that, for the first time, this is really a denial of equality under the Constitution of Japan. And I think that's a really important step. I think we do need to have more court cases coming out that really clearly say Article 14 of the Constitution of Japan really guarantees equality for all, and this is a violation of that principle. And it must be rectified through law reform that would move to the next step and make changes around the actual Japanese family registry system so that the registry itself would evolve and allow a same-sex marriage to be fully legally recognized at the national level.
And just finally, what do citizens think? Do most agree that same-sex marriage should be legalized?
Well, I think we've seen interesting increases in the polls, right? And certainly the attitudes of 20 to 60-year-olds in Japan are more progressive, often more open-minded. And I think if we're thinking about the way that we see individual rights unfolding, the basic unit of a democracy is the individual. It's not the household, and it's certainly not the head of household as in the olden days. And I think the Japanese Family Registry still maintains sort of that older view of the head of the household, which is often the male citizen, as having the rights to protections under democracy. But really, all individuals have that right. And so having this expand, and certainly young people are understanding of those individual rights, those democratic rights, and those rights to democratic equality. And I think it's showing up in the polls quite clearly by Dentsu and others.
Dr. Jackie Steele, thanks so much.
Thank you for having me.